Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Have you ever noticed how some people only feel powerful when they can get a reaction out of you? Have you ever seen how certain individuals feed on your responses, your explanations, your emotions, and your attention? They want to pull the strings, and they rely on your voice, your presence, and your energy to keep that control alive. But the moment you stop feeding their ego, the moment you stop entertaining their manipulation, the moment you stop explaining yourself to people who already made up their minds, their entire grip on you starts to fall apart. Silence is not just the absence of sound. Silence is removal of access. Silence is emotional detachment. Silence is self-protection. Silence is clarity. And silence is the one thing a controlling person can't handle. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. When you go silent, you are taking back the one thing they never expected you to reclaim: your inner authority. You stop reacting. You stop defending yourself. You stop letting them stir chaos inside your heart, and suddenly everything changes. Not because you attacked them, not because you explained your side, not because you fought harder, but because you did the opposite. You walked away emotionally, mentally, and energetically. Your silence breaks the dynamic they depended on. Your silence disrupts the pattern they built. Your silence removes the fuel they used against you. And the moment they realize they can no longer trigger you or control you or pressure you, that is the exact moment their power collapses. Controlling people don't fear confrontation. They fear losing access. They don't fear your voice. They fear your absence. They don't panic when you argue. They panic when you no longer care enough to respond. Silence is where you stop playing their game. Silence is where you stop letting your emotions be their leverage. Silence is where you become unpredictable, grounded, and powerful. And that power is quiet, but it is intense. It is steady. It is life-changing. This video will break down exactly how silence becomes a weapon of peace, strength, and freedom, and how choosing quiet control over emotional chaos helps you reclaim every part of yourself they once tried to influence. And before we begin, now I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments right now. My silence ends their control, and my peace is untouchable.
Number 1. Silence exposes their manipulation. One of the most powerful things silence does is strip away every illusion and expose the truth of someone's behavior. When a person tries to manipulate you, they rely on emotional reactions. They count on you feeling pressured, confused, guilty, or responsible for their feelings. They use constant talking, arguments, guilt trips, and drama to create a fog around your mind. But silence cuts through that fog instantly. When you stop responding, you stop feeding the manipulation. You stop giving them material to twist. You stop giving them emotional openings. And without your reaction, their tactics fall flat. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit." In silence, you are no longer complicit. You reclaim your mind. You reclaim your clarity. You reclaim the ability to see things as they truly are, not as they try to make them appear. When you stay quiet instead of defending yourself, they cannot twist your words. When you go still instead of explaining yourself, they cannot shift blame onto you. When you detach instead of pleading for understanding, they cannot use your empathy against you. Silence forces them to confront their own behavior with no distractions. And most controlling people hate silence for this exact reason. Because silence is truth. Silence is a mirror. Silence reveals who they are when they no longer have you as their emotional playground. When you refuse to participate, you shut down their power. You protect your peace. You allow their actions to speak louder than their excuses. The moment you choose silence, the emotional fog they rely on disappears, and you finally see the situation with clear eyes. And once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. Now drop this affirmation in the comments. I stay silent because I see clearly.
Number 2, silence breaks the cycle of control they depend on. People who try to control you don't do it randomly. They do it because they've learned your patterns. They know what triggers you, they know what words make you defend yourself. They know how to provoke your emotions, and they know how to get you to explain or justify things you don't owe them. They rely on your predictable reactions to keep you tied to their emotional patterns. But silence destroys that pattern instantly. The moment you refuse to respond the way they expect, their control weakens. When you stay quiet, they can't read you. When you stay calm, they lose the emotional advantage. When you don't react, they no longer know how to pull you back into the same old conversations, arguments, or guilt traps they've used before. Silence breaks the rhythm that allowed them to influence you. Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." When you stay silent, you protect your thoughts from their interference. You give yourself a chance to breathe, to think, to slow down, to observe the situation without letting someone else's words push you into emotional chaos. Silence becomes the space where you regain control over your inner world. Instead of reacting instantly, you see their behavior for what it really is, an attempt to regain power they feel slipping away. And the more silent you remain, the more desperate they become, because their old strategies no longer work. That shift terrifies controlling people because it means you're no longer operating on their terms. You're no longer playing the role they assigned you. You're no longer feeding the cycle that kept you drained. In silence, you break the chain. In silence, you reclaim the momentum. In silence, you remind them that your emotions belong to you and no one else. And once they see they can't control your reactions anymore, their entire strategy collapses.
Number 3, silence exposes their true motives without you lifting a finger. When you refuse to argue, defend, or explain yourself, something powerful happens. People reveal who they truly are without you doing anything. Silence becomes a filter that separates genuine intention from manipulation. Those who respected you from the beginning will give you space, patience, understanding, and calm communication. But those who depended on controlling you will panic, provoke, pressure, or guilt trip you when you withdraw your voice. They're not upset because they care. They're upset because the silence removes their ability to influence your thinking. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit." By staying silent, you remove that complicity. You take your mind back from their grip. When someone's motives were pure, your silence won't threaten them. They will respond with maturity and accountability. But when their motives were rooted in ego, power, or manipulation, your silence exposes their true character instantly. They get angry because they can't control you. They become irritated because they can't predict you. They try to bait you into reacting because your silence forces them to face their own behavior. That discomfort is the truth revealing itself. Silence becomes a mirror they can't escape. And this is where your power grows, not by speaking, but by observing. You begin to see patterns that were once hidden. You notice the difference between who respects your boundaries and who only respected your availability. Silence shows you who values you and who values the access you gave them. It shows you who wants clarity and who wants control. It shows you who is capable of growth and who only grows frustrated when they can't pull your strings. Most people talk too quickly and think too slowly. Your silence reverses that. It forces the truth to step forward. It reveals everything you need to know without you having to dig for it. So protect your silence, because it is the tool that uncovers everything words could have blurred. Now I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments right now. My silence reveals what words could never show.
Number 4. Silence breaks their expectations and rewrites the power dynamic. People treat you based on the patterns you allow, and most of those patterns are built around your reactions. If you always responded quickly, they expected access. If you always defended yourself, they expected explanations. If you always forgave fast, they expected no consequences. But the moment you go silent, everything they relied on collapses. Your silence interrupts the script they were using to control your emotions, and suddenly they're left with uncertainty, the one thing they cannot manage. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Silence applies that truth perfectly. When you choose not to react, you reclaim the one thing they never thought you would take back, your mental space. Your absence becomes the disruption they never planned for. Silence breaks the rhythm they were dancing on. Silence confuses the ego that fed off your responses. Silence removes the fuel they depended on to feel in control. And because you no longer play by the rules they set, they don't know how to function. They start overthinking. They start wondering if they lost you. They start questioning their own actions. They start fearing the consequences they were sure would never come. You shift from predictable to unreadable, from available to selective, from emotional to composed. And that shift turns their comfort into fear. When someone can no longer predict you, they can no longer control you. Silence is how you break every expectation they use to influence your behavior. It forces them to see you differently, not as someone they can lean on when convenient, but as someone with boundaries, self-respect, and emotional structure. That shift in perception is where your power grows.
Number 5. Silence shows them you are no longer emotionally available to control. When someone has been used to influencing your emotions, they depend on your reactions more than you realize. They depend on your frustration to reassure them you still care. They depend on your explanations to feel superior. They depend on your arguments to stay relevant. They depend on your emotional responses as proof that they still have a place in your mind. But the moment you go silent, the chain snaps. Your silence tells them that you are no longer operating from emotion. You are operating from clarity. Epictetus said, "No person is free who is not master of themselves." And when you stop reacting, you step into a higher version of yourself, one that cannot be manipulated by guilt, pressure, or emotional games. Silence marks the moment they no longer have access to your inner world. And that loss of access hits harder than any confrontation ever could. It makes them realize you're no longer the person they could push, pull, or provoke. They feel the difference immediately. Instead of feeding their ego, your silence starves it. Instead of validating their behavior, your silence exposes it. Instead of fighting for them, your silence shows you've chosen yourself. They begin wondering why their usual tactics don't work anymore. They question whether someone else has your attention now. They obsess over the meaning behind your calm, because they can't manipulate what they can't read. And that mystery becomes their torment. The more emotionally grounded you appear,
the more they feel the loss of the version of you they once controlled. This is where your transformation becomes undeniable. Silence becomes your shield. Silence becomes your boundary. Silence becomes your proof that you refuse to participate in emotional manipulation ever again. Your calm is no longer for them. It's for your growth, your healing, and your future. Now I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments right now. My silence proves that I belong to myself now.
Number 6. Silence makes your energy scarce, and scarcity creates value. People only appreciate what is always available when it suddenly isn't. And the same principle applies to your attention, your presence, and your emotional energy. When you decide to go silent, when you stop giving updates, reassurance, reactions, or explanations, you introduce something they never expected from you: scarcity. Scarcity has a psychological effect stronger than any spoken message. Marcus Aurelius said, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." When you pull back your energy, you're not only upgrading your own mind, you're creating a shift in how they perceive you. Suddenly, you're no longer easy to reach. You're no longer predictable. You're no longer the one they can call any time and expect an instant response. Your silence makes them realize that access to you was a privilege they misused. People chase what feels rare, not what feels guaranteed. When you were always available, they assumed your presence was endless. But when you choose silence, they start to understand that you were giving them something valuable: your time, your attention, your emotional openness, and they failed to treat it with respect. Scarcity forces them to reflect on everything they took for granted. It forces them to confront the reality that you have changed, that you have options, that you no longer revolve around their moods or demands. Silence creates mystery, and mystery creates value. They begin paying attention to things they ignored before. They replay old conversations. They study their own mistakes. They question whether they pushed you too far. They start to feel the absence they once thought they were strong enough to overlook. And in that uncomfortable space, your worth becomes undeniable. Your silence becomes the reminder they never wanted but desperately needed, that you were never ordinary, and losing you is a consequence of their own behavior. Let your distance speak loud enough for them to understand what they lost.
Number 7. Silence exposes their true intentions without you having to lift a finger. One of the most powerful things about staying silent is that it forces people to reveal who they really are when they can no longer rely on your reactions. Epictetus said, "If someone tries to provoke you, remember that it is your judgment that does the provoking." This means the moment you stop giving them the emotional payoff they expect, the mask they wear begins to slide off. When you step back and withhold your words, your attention, and your emotional responses, they no longer have the control they once enjoyed. If they were manipulating you, they will start to push harder. If they were pretending, they will get frustrated. If they were using you, they will look for the next person to drain. But if they actually cared, your silence will make them reflect, adjust, reach out respectfully, or try to understand where they went wrong. Silence becomes a filter. It separates the ones who only showed up when they needed something from the ones who stay present, even when you stop feeding their ego. It exposes who panics when they can't control you anymore, who gets angry when they lose their grip, and who becomes respectful once they realize you won't dance to their tune.
True intentions always surface when silence removes the noise that hides them. And the beautiful part is that you don't have to argue, defend yourself, or prove anything. You just have to observe. That clarity protects your spirit, sharpens your insight, and gives you the freedom to decide who deserves a place in your life. Silence doesn't just reveal people, it reveals the truth you've been avoiding because you were too busy giving, explaining, fixing, or chasing. When you stop talking, their behavior becomes the answer. And once you see it clearly, you can walk forward with strength instead of doubt. Now I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments right now. My silence reveals what words cannot.
Number 8. Silence builds inner power that no one can take away from you. Silence is not empty, weak, or passive. Silence is strength under control, and strength under control becomes unshakable power. Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." When you embrace silence, you create the space to clean up your thoughts, sharpen your mind, and rebuild your confidence from the inside out. Silence helps you return to yourself, reconnect with your values, and remember what you deserve. People who try to control you rely heavily on your reactions. They want your attention, your energy, your emotions, your responses. They need you to be loud, emotional, confused, or defensive because that gives them a sense of power. But the moment you go quiet, everything flips. You no longer give them emotional fuel. You no longer feed their ego. You no longer react to their triggers. In that stillness, you start hearing your own voice again, the one you lost while trying to keep the peace or earn approval. Silence allows you to see what you couldn't see before because you were drowning in noise. It lets you notice how you feel, what you need, and what boundaries you must rebuild to protect your peace. Silence teaches you how to control your reactions, and when you control your reactions, no one can ever manipulate you again through pressure, guilt, or fear. Inner power grows when you stop letting temporary emotions dictate permanent decisions. Inner power grows when you choose restraint over chaos. Inner power grows when you let silence speak for you instead of fighting battles that only drain your soul. Stoic wisdom teaches that real strength is mastering yourself, not others. That mastery starts in silence. And as you grow stronger inside, the world outside begins to change because people can no longer access you through the old patterns. Your silence becomes a shield, a teacher, and a declaration of self-worth. If you've made it this far, then you already feel the truth of everything we talked about. Silence isn't weakness. Silence isn't surrender. Silence is you stepping back into your power, taking control of your emotions, and choosing yourself over situations that drained you. The moment you stop reacting, you start rising. The moment you stop explaining, you start evolving. And the moment you stop giving people access to your energy, they finally realize what they lost. Stoic philosophy teaches that true strength isn't about dominating others, it's about mastering yourself. And when you master your silence, you master your life. You walk differently, you think differently, you move differently. You become someone who cannot be controlled, pressured, or manipulated. You become someone who leads with calm confidence instead of fear. So as you move forward, protect your peace, value your presence, and never forget that your silence can change everything.
If this message gave you clarity, strength, or inspiration, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful content, and turn on notifications so you never miss another video that helps you rise higher. And before you go, drop one final affirmation in the comments. My silence is my strength, and my peace is my priority.